of Bandai Namco, I was graciously given the opportunity to play the PC version of Katamari Damacy REROLL. And if you haven't played the original Katamari Damacy as it was released on PlayStation 2 or any of its other sequels or re-releases, then this seems like a perfect time to pick it up and finally give it a whirl. So my only concern about reviewing Katamari Damacy REROLL is that it is just so much just the original game repackaged that I fear a lot of what I'm going to be saying is just going to be a review of the original game rather than this re-release. So for those of you who at this point have never played Katamari Damacy before, I'll try to be really brief. For anyone who doesn't speak Japanese and understandably can't figure out what the game is about just from the title alone, the literal translation of the Japanese words Katamari Damacy is cluster soul. And at base, creating clusters or masses, or let's just be real, a literal ball of stuff is exactly all you're doing in this game. You're basically a tiny, silent protagonist alien from outer space, and your dad, the king of all cosmos, accidentally flew around space and destroyed all of the stars along the way. And now, rather than fixing what he broke himself, he sent you, the prince, down to Earth to roll up a whole bunch of stuff so that he can throw it into space and replace all the stars he destroyed. In retrospect, he seems like a pretty dangerous, narcissistic psychopath despite his fabulous purple tights. But hey, at least the cleanup job is fun. He starts you off with a tiny sticky ball called a Katamari, and it's your job to start rolling it and, little by little, picking up things like thumbtacks and pencils and erasers. But before you know it, you're rolling up cats, dogs, tables, and people. And it all escalates from there until you're rolling up trees and buildings, eventually even getting giant monsters and superheroes, and then finally rainbows, clouds, and even Mount Fuji! Whew, by the time you get to that point, it's a real rush and you're just trying to pick up everything in sight before your timer runs out. And you are in fact timed in most of your tasks. Your smaller balls can be rolled up in just a few minutes, but by the end of the game you're trying to recreate the moon! Mind you, you have to realize you're throwing screaming, terrified, living human beings directly into space, which again, is a lot more terrifying in retrospect. And the king gives you 25 minutes to roll up a ball of stuff that's 300 meters big. That sounds like a lot of time, but if you haven't mastered the controls, you may find yourself really racing the clock to do it all in time. Other tasks include trying to recreate night sky constellations like Cygnus, where you just have to roll up as many birds as you possibly can, or Ursa Major, where the task is to only get one bear, but it has to be the biggest bear you can find. And if you get even one single tiny bear, it's all over, and your dad shames you for the small size of your bear. The graphics are bright and vibrant and colorful. The soundtrack to both this game and its sequel are incredibly creative and diverse in musical styles, all of which have lyrics about rolling stuff up and throwing them into space.
I know you love me. I wanna word you up into my life. Let's roll up to be a single star in the sky.
And the only word I can possibly use to describe the game on the whole is simply joy. I have felt nothing but joy every time I have picked up Katamari Damacy, and this time was no exception. Now, I do need to somewhat differentiate my experience specifically with Katamari Damacy REROLL, or else this almost wouldn't even be a review of this particular release. So, being that this is the PC version, I initially thought I would try to play the game using the keyboard to control the Katamari, but don't. Just don't, okay? There is no worse way I could possibly think to play this game than with the keyboard. It wants you to use way too many buttons, and they're stupid buttons, and I almost didn't even make it outside the tutorial screen. Instead, I ended up plugging in my PlayStation 4 controller, and thankfully, the game immediately identified it as a PS4 controller, and even gave me instructions with the PS4's button mapping. And honestly, if you're playing on a Sony controller, that's about as close to the 2004 PlayStation 2 experience as you can get in a modern age. As with its previous releases, your controls are primarily primarily done almost entirely with your two thumbsticks, with your L1 and R1 buttons used to quickly turn yourself around. I do wish that I had access to the Switch version to give some more personal thoughts on that control scheme, but I'm sure someone else has done that for you. Perhaps then, my only complaint is that it's such a direct recreation of the original game, down to collecting your princely cousins and collecting presents from your kingly dad to wear, like a crown or a scarf, that nothing about it was a new experience at all. There was very little that was going to make me come back to it as someone who beat the game originally almost 15 years ago, other than the fact that it's a fantastically nostalgic experience. In fact, I had such muscle memory for how to play the game that I almost didn't realize how short it actually is. In just one single 4-hour sitting, I rolled up every single star on the game one time and obtained 90% of the achievements to be found on Steam. Oh yeah, there's achievements in the game now, so maybe that's something new worth mentioning. But unless you're a completionist who would like to go back and roll up the biggest possible stars in the fastest time to get all the remaining achievements, you probably don't need to play the game more than 4 hours. In fact, I would say that even if you're a completionist, you're not gonna be in the game much longer than 4 hours, because if you can get 90% of the achievements in 4 hours, it's not gonna take you that much longer to get the remaining 10%. So, as a final thought, if you've already played Katamari Damacy before, you may not necessarily need to get Katamari Damacy REROLL, although playing it again is certainly a joy. But if you've never played this game before and don't have access to it on another console, I gotta say, there really is no reason not to pick it up now. Katamari Damacy REROLL is available now on PC and Nintendo Switch, and it has my approval.